Welcome to Stepping Up Kosher. I think it's lesson 13. Where each week we try to step up our kosher observance by learning a little bit of the laws of kosher, different categories of the laws of kosher. And today specifically, we are going to be learning the laws of immersing our dishes in the mikvah. Okay? So as always, we have to begin with an introduction to understand the background of this mitzvah, where it comes from, where the mitzvah comes from, and why we're doing this, right? So actually, the source for this mitzvah in the Torah is the same. Well, I shouldn't say the same. It's the verse right after the previous lessons that we've been doing about kosherizing vessels with boiling hot water or with low torching them, etc. So this comes to us from Milchemet Midian, the war with Midian, and right after the laws of right after it says that any vessel that you take from the Midianites, you have to kosherize by pouring boiling hot water or by blow torching it, right? So he then continues and he says, "Ach b'meinida yischata." And for this we learn out that any dish, any vessel, any pot, any pan that a Jew uses has to be immersed in a mikvah. Okay, but specifically this law applies to any vessel that goes from the ownership, from the possession of a non-Jew to the possession of a Jew. All right, so let's.
Does that include if you buy at a store?
Yes, it does, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. We're going to get into all the details, but that is condition number one: is that it has to be a vessel that went from the ownership, of the possession of a non-Jew to the possession of a Jew. Condition number two: it has to be specifically vessels that are used for eating, right? So you don't have to immerse your chairs and your tables in the mikvah. But anything that is, and the reason for that is because in the verse in the Torah, it's right next to the details of kosherizing vessels, right? Koshering. So therefore, toiveling and koshering is the same type of vessels. And number three is, it applies specifically to metal vessels. And then we'll soon talk about it to glass, because glass is similar to metal, etc., etc. And we'll talk about glass; it's its own category, etc. Okay, so let's start off by talking about the first condition, which was that it's specifically for dishes that are going from the possession of a non-Jew to the possession of a Jew. The obligation to immerse our vessels in the mikvah is specifically for a keli, a vessel that goes from the ownership, from the possession of a non-Jew to the possession of a Jew, either by purchase or with a gift. It doesn't make a difference. And it doesn't make a difference if this is an old vessel, which means that the non-Jew used it, whether it's in the kosher or non-kosher, doesn't matter whether he used it or whether it's a brand new vessel that he just created, he just made it, and he's now selling it to you or giving it to you as a gift. It doesn't make a difference. You have to immerse it in a mikvah before you use it. The difference would be that if it's a vessel that a non-Jew did use, then obviously you have to also kosherize it, right? Because we don't know what he used it for. If this vessel was in the ownership of a Jew, okay, and the Jew sold it to a non-Jew, and now the non-Jew is selling it to a Jew, right? So then you still need to immerse it in the mikvah. However, you can do so without a bracha. Why? Because it's still going from a non-Jew to a Jew, but because it was originally in the possession of a Jew, we say you don't need to make a bracha on it. Even more than that, even if it's a vessel that a non-Jew made it, right? So let's say it comes from in today's. One second, we'll get to that. Even let's say it comes from a factory, a non-Jewish factory, right? And then he made it specifically for a Jew. So let's say you know the guy who has the factory, or it's a very customized thing, whatever. You're going to the person's factory, and he's making it for you, right? And he's making it maybe even from your own things. So this is really hard to imagine today, right? But he's making it from your materials. Let's say back in the day, right? You had, I don't know, maybe even a pot, right? And you wanted a pan. So you bring it to a blacksmith. He's going to take it. He's going to melt it down for you. And then he's going to reform it into a pan, etc. So it's your materials, right? And the non-Jew is making it for you. You still need to immerse it in a mikvah. However, in this instance, you do it without a bracha, obviously because all of it came from you. So it turns out that in a factory where all the workers are non-Jews, even if the owners of the factory are Jewish, which is basically what I just described. So in other words, the materials belong to a Jew, because the owner of the factory is Jewish. Let's say you're buying something from, I don't know, what's like I can't think of a Jewish brand, right? But let's say you look it up.
Cambridge and the owners are there.
Right, but that's not the owners of a factory. Here I'm saying, like, let's say OXO, right, which is a big brand that's from Bed Bath & Beyond. I don't know if it's owned by a Jew. Let's assume that it's owned by a Jew. right? And so therefore, all the metal that they're making the vessels out of, obviously, all belong to a Jew. But
Right.
the factory, I'm sure, has many, many non-Jews working in it, right? You would still need to immerse in the mikvah, but just without a bracha. Today, if you don't know, obviously, if you're buying it from a factory, just a regular standard factory, you have to assume that you have to make a bracha on it. Unless you know that it comes from a Jew, then you don't make a bracha. Okay?
Well, but if a Jew owns it, do all the workers have to be Jewish, or just if it's a Jewish factory?
But that's exactly what he said. That if it's a Jewish factory and there's non-Jews that are working in the factory, then you still have to immerse it in the mikvah just without a bracha.
Okay,
But I was just addressing that today. You buy something in the store, you don't know.
Yeah.
Right, how are you supposed to know? So we make a bracha. Okay, because the majority of factories are owned by non-Jews and have non-Jews working in them, and the materials are owned by non-Jews, etc., etc. Okay, but he still wants to address all these details, so let's talk about one more case. And that is, what's if there's a partnership? There's a factory or store that's owned in partnership between a Jew and a non-Jew, right? So if let's say you buy a vessel that is owned by a Jew and a non-Jew together, right? And the same thing with a factory, that's the same way. And I just want to clarify that this also applies to all publicly traded companies today, which very often when you're buying a vessel, you're buying from a big public company, publicly traded. I'm sure there are some Jews that bought stocks. Jews definitely tend to buy stocks, right? And there's Jews and non-Jews that are only right. So it's considered a factory that's owned by a Jew and non-Jew in partnership. You should still make a bracha on immersing these vessels in the mikveh. Okay, let's talk about what the vessel needs to be used for. So the obligation to immerse our vessels in a mikveh is specifically for vessels that are going to be used for food and food preparation, right? For eating and food preparation. Meaning to say, any vessels that come in contact with food or with drink during a meal or in preparation for a meal. So, in this category fall, and he goes through a whole bunch of different, right? Things that are used to grind food, things that are used to cut food, things that are used for cooking or for baking, all of these things, right? Why? Because all of these vessels come into contact directly with the food product that you're going to be eating. The difference is that if you are going to be using a vessel for food preparation, and it's so early in the food preparation game that even after it's done going through that vessel, I'll give you an example in a minute, right? But even after you're done going through that vessel, the food will not be ready to eat. So let's say, for example, all of the vessels that you're going to use in preparation to make flour. So let's say a grinder that's going to grind grain into flour, and then a sifter that you're going to use to sift the flour to make all of that. And then by the time you're done, all you have is flour, and then you're going to use that flour to turn it into a dough, etc. So then those vessels you don't have to make a bracha on. I don't know if anybody has those kind of vessels in the
But
house.
you still have to
Trying
know
to think
the
of a practical
mikvah, so
example.
it's just safer to do it
Yeah,
because you don't know how to be used.
Ooh,
right?
that's a very interesting point. So Vicky has suggested that it might be safer to make a bracha because you don't know how it's going to be used. That's not so true, because making a bracha includes saying Hashem's name, and we don't want to make a bracha for no reason, right? Because then you'd be literally one of the 10 commandments, right? Saying Hashem's name in the name. So we try to be careful. And at the end of today's lesson, we're going to go through actually a whole list. There's a whole list here of different types of vessels and whether they need immersion or not, and whether you make a bracha on them or not. Okay? I hope that the rest of my class is going to be on target, because I just noticed that one of the administrators for the OK is watching the class live on Facebook. Now Rabbi Yitzchak Anoka once came and helped give this class. Remember?
Yes.
Remember when he was here, Rabbi Anoka's brother? And he came and he gave a little bit of the class about checking bugs, which I was very thankful for, because it was a very complicated topic, and he gave us like some real good tips. But today his brother-in-law, Rabbi Fogelman, is watching live. So first of all, we want to give him a shout out. And second of all, I hope I say everything right. If not, feel free to write in the comments and correct me. I take no offense.
Well, I was waiting for this class because I have a bunch of stuff to tovel, and I want to know what I have to tovel. So I'm going
Maybe
to
I'll offer him to come on live. We'll put him on the spot. We'll offer him to come on live, and he can give the class. All right, let's keep going from the book. Okay, what type of vessels need immersion? So minadin, according to the letter of the law, the obligation of immersing vessels is on metal. Okay. But remember, metal is a very broad category. So gold or silver or bronze or steel or I don't even know all of these how to translate all of these from Hebrew. Right? Different types of steel. So that's the original obligation. The same applies to glass. So to this, and any sort of glass included, right? If it's Pyrex, or if it's a regular glass, or if it's Corel, that's all glass for the sake of our conversation, right? Now, this does not apply to porcelain. Let's talk about porcelain. So porcelain, and included this is any sort of earthenware, right? So china and things like that. You should immerse them in the mikvah, but you don't make a bracha. Any vessels that are made out of some sort of ceramic or porcelain or earthenware, etc. The same goes. I'm sorry, I'm mixing up categories here. Anything that's made out of ceramic, which means that it doesn't have any glass inside the earthenware. Anything that's made out of stone, anything that's made out of wood, anything that's made out of he says nylon here, but yeah, I guess I'm translate properly. Any sort of plastic, according to the letter of the law, you actually don't need to immerse them at all. But today, most people, or I say many people that are trying to be more stringent, they will actually choose to immerse it in the mikvah. However, obviously, you don't make a bracha on it. I will say that personally, in my family, we don't table plastic. This is kind of where families fall different there. For example, my grandfather, who's a Rav, told me you shouldn't table plastic, you shouldn't immerse plastic in the mikvah. But I know that the Hanokas, for example, do. So there's that. By the way, we're not talking about one-time use. We're going to get to that in a second. First, let's talk about what if something is made up, as usual, of multiple types of things, right? So let's say you have a blade for a smoothie machine, which is metal, obviously, but then the rest of it is made out of plastic. So what about that, right? So in that case, if the metal is inside somewhere that it doesn't touch the food, so let's say, I don't know, you have some sort of metal thing, but then it has a plastic coating over it, right? So then you should still immerse in the mikvah, but you don't make a bracha. But if the metal is going to be touching the food, so then you tevel it and you make a bracha as well. Here he goes. One-time use, disposable vessels. Even if they're made out of metal, by the way, do not need to be tevel. They do not need to be immersed in the mikvah. So this is very important for us Angelinos. I don't like calling myself an Angelino. I prefer to call myself a Pasadenian, right? But for us people who live in the state of California, let's call us Californians, but the ones that fly out of LAX, right? So at LAX, they recently banned all sale of plastic bottles. You guys notice that?
Right.
They don't sell any more plastic bottle things, but they still sell one-time use, right? So they sell these water bottles that are metal water bottles. Yeah. And you buy it. It costs you an arm and a leg. I've never bought it yet, thank God, because I always bring my own plastic bottle that has water in it already and get it through security and fill it up with water on the other side.
Right,
that's what I do. But if you do buy a metal water bottle, you're good. Why? Because even though it's made out of metal, because it's one-time use, you don't need to immerse it in the mikvah.
But shouldn't you have to throw it out when you're done, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. If you start using it more than once, then you do need to table it. Yes. Yeah. Correct. Which also would apply, for example, to Rabbi Hanoka's grandmother, which I think I told you about. He had a grandmother, it was a grandmother or a great aunt, that used to collect yahrzeit candles.
Oh.
And when she was done with the yahrzeit candles, she would clean it out and use it as a glass. And she had a set of yahrzeit candle glasses. Can you imagine? So when it's one-time use and it wasn't even used for food, she wouldn't need to table it. But the moment you're going to start using it now, you need to table that in the mikvah.
She saved them.
Yeah, apparently that was a thing. Anyways, okay, let's talk about the actual tabling. Okay, so now we established what needs to be tabled and what does need to be tabled. I'm going to continue to use this Yiddish word tabled, which means basically immersing, right? All right. So let's start with the preparation, getting ready to table. So the first thing you need to do is you need to clean the vessel, make sure that there's no dirt on it, no rust on it, no sticker on it. Very, very common, right? So you might want to get yourself a bottle of Gugan. By a lot of mikvahs, a lot of Gugan. I'll tell you about it in a second. By a lot of dishes and mikvahs, they have a bottle of Gugan. Gugan is a product they sell. G-O-O, Gugan, right? It's a product they sell in Target or whatever. And you buy it and you spray it on. Help makes it very easy to take off a sticker that might be a little abstinent with getting all of the glue off. You have to take it all off. Why? Because we want to make sure that the water, as you stick it into the mikvah, is going to go all over the vessel. All right. Any sort of chatzitza means an interruption. So if something has a sticker on it, that's a chatzitza. It's an interruption. It's a disruption between the water touching the vessel. That is found on a vessel has to be taken off. However, if it's something that most people don't really care about it, and they're going to use it even without taking it off, and the person who's going to use the vessel doesn't care about having it on, so then you can actually immerse in the vessel together with this. So an example of this would be, let's say you have a salad bowl, right? And on the bottom of the salad bowl there was a sticker. And you took off the sticker, and because nobody likes to have a sticker on their salad bowl, right? So you take it off, and you start scrubbing, and there's still a little bit of glue left over, and it's still... If it's the type of glue that you're not going to care about, at that point you can let go and say, all right, that's it. I don't care about it anymore, and now you're immersing the mikvah. Why? Because that basically becomes part of the vessel, right? In other words, if there's a sticker on there that's ugly, and you care about it, Even if you don't take it off for a couple of days, it doesn't make a difference. You care about it. So, and most people care about it. It's making your salad bowl ugly. Especially if it's on the side of the bowl. If it's inside the bowl, inside the pot, then you would never use the pot that way, right? So that's basically the barometer of how we decide whether something is a chatzitza or not, whether something is a disruption or not between the water and the vessel. Okay. Come again?
You started rolling, and she got this gigantic smile. She
Yeah,
was so
she got happy. She got happy that I gave her attention.
Oh, somebody's paying attention to you. She was so happy.
She definitely likes when we pay attention to her. Okay. What if you have a vessel that is one of these ones that gets assembled? You know, like I was giving an example of a smoothie machine, right? It's got multiple pieces and you can assemble it like a machine. Or your food processor, your Cuisinart, right?
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of pieces, it all comes apart,
A
etc.
lot of mixers too, they have the
Exactly.
the cord
Yeah.
is attached.
So there's a couple of things. First of all, you have to take everything apart. So even if it's a thermos or a water bottle that has a top and a bottom, you have to take each piece apart and toivel each piece individually. However, you still only need to toivel now you don't need to toivel pieces that are not going to come apart while you use it. So don't unscrew your handle from your pot. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You only if it's actually people assemble it and disassemble it in regular use, then you need to disassemble it and toivel each piece individually. However, once you disassemble it, you might gain some ease. Why? Because maybe it's like a water bottle, that the bottle itself is plastic, reusable water bottle, and you're not going to table plastic. But the lid is made, or maybe it's made out of something else that you don't table, right? And the lid is made out of metal. So you only need to table the lid. So for example, for me, by a smoothie machine, right? It's only made out of plastic, and only the blade needs to be tabled. So I only table the blade. One more point. When you're disassembling a machine or something like that, right? You obviously only need to table the parts that are going to touch the food. So let's say, for example, if you're going to buy a sandwich maker or a George Foreman or any sort of one of those machines like that, right? You don't need to stick the whole machine into the water. You can take off most of them. You can remove. You unscrew and you remove the plate. Yeah. That's what's touching the food. The rest of it is not going to touch the food, right? Yeah. So you take off the plates, table them in the mikvah, wash them, put them back on. You're good to go. If the plates do not come off, we'll talk about it in a moment. That might be challenging. Usually, what people do is they just immerse the whole thing, and then you just wait. You have to wait. I don't know
until it dries.
Yeah, like a couple days. Wash it right away, and then wait a couple days until it dries.
But if it's got the plug, some of these older ones have.
The plug attached. Yeah. So when you do that, so you table it, wait a couple days for the water to dry out.
Wow.
Then you can use it and you'll be just fine.
Safe?
Yes, it is safe. I've done it before. Maybe I shouldn't take responsibility here, but yes, I believe it is safe. Okay.
Joe had a question.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Why is plastic not supposed to be washed, or toilet?
Why does plastic not need to be toivel? So the law only applies to metal. Glass is considered very similar to metal, and with regards to plastic, there's a discussion about whether it is the same as metal or not.
A new substance.
A new substance that came around later, so people are not sure. Do you compare it to glass? Do you compare it to metal? Do you compare it to earthenware? What do you compare it to? But that's a good question about why, like for example, only metal needs to be toiveled and not earthenware. When it comes to kosherizing, I know the answer is because of the porousness. In other words, a metal object, we're told that it swallows taste and then it spits out taste. An earthenware vessel, apparently, it keeps swallowing and it keeps swallowing and then it does it all at the same time. So it's impossible to ever fully get the taste out. That's what it says in halacha. But I don't know that why when it comes to toiveling, probably just because they're both in the same verse. So therefore, they're compatible one to the other. But maybe there's an actual reason that I just don't know it. So I'll reserve that and I'll say I don't know. Okay? I'll reserve the right to say I don't know. Can I give you something, Meidla? Maybe a cucumber. You want to pass me the vegetables, please, Joe? Thank you. Okay. So far we've prepared the vessel for toiveling. Yes? Now we move on to actually toiveling. Now we move on to the bracha. Before we actually say, you want this cucumber? Here you go. Enjoy. And me? Okay. You hold the vessel in your right hand, and now you make a bracha. And right after you make the bracha, you stick you stick it in and you're going to toivel. Okay, but first you make the bracha. When you're doing only one vessel, the blessing is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe. Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, who has sanctified us with our commandments and commanded us to Al Tevilas Keli.
Could you say that's all?
Al Tevilas Keli. Al Tevilas Tevilas. Tevilas.
LAS.
Yeah. Al Tevilas Keli. Keli. That's the blessing. Okay, so Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al tevilas keli. But that's only if you're doing one vessel. If you're doing more than one vessel, then you add an M at the end, kelim, because that's plural in Hebrew.
So you don't have to bless each one as you
No,
go.
you do it once at the beginning, and then you start doing them all, and you do them all. However, you should make sure not to interrupt. Just like if you're doing one, you should make sure not to interrupt between the bracha and doing the first vessel. So if you're doing multiple vessels, you should make sure not to talk during the whole process. All right? Think of Friday night, right? After you wash your hands for hamotzi and you don't talk until it. Yeah. Sometimes if there's like 10 guests, people can take some time, right? So here's the same thing. You have 10 vessels. It's going to take you some time, but by the time it's all done, you'll be all right. If you did make an interruption, so let's say you spoke or you needed to go do something else and then come back between vessel to vessel, if it had to do with immersing the vessels, like you're doing it together with somebody, you say, pass me this, whatever, that's all fine. That's all considered part of it, and it's not an interruption. But if it's something else, then actually you need to make a new blessing on the next keli, on the next vessel. Okay? If you have a vessel, some sort of vessel, let's say, for example, plastic, right? That you're not sure if you have to table it or not. By not sure, we don't mean you're not sure. We mean halacha itself is not sure. Or, for example, you're not sure whether this vessel was owned by a non-Jew or not. Or some other sort of doubt, some other sort of uncertainty when it comes to this thing. So then, safek brachas lahakil, which means whenever you're unsure, because remember we said, if you make a bracha for no reason, you're saying Hashem's name in vain. So therefore, we always say, if you're in doubt about whether you need to make a bracha or not, just don't make it. All right? Immerse it without a bracha. Because making a bracha with Hashem's name for no reason is considered a pretty big deal. You're saying Hashem's name for no reason. So that's why, if you have a safek, if you're in doubt, you don't do it. You fell again? All right, yeah. Next one. All right, this is your last one, all right? If you drop this one, then we're just going to say, forget it. You don't want it. You're not being careful enough. Or we'll have to find you something else to chew on. Okay. Ready? Mm-hmm. All right. What about the person? The person making the blessing. So, obviously, he needs to be clothed. He cannot be naked. I know this seems like a strange law to you, because you're imagining going to the mikvah right here at our dishes mikvah and immersing. But right. What's this? Let's say a man, he's going to the mikvah erev Shabbos, right before Shabbos, or for Hasidim every single morning, right? He's going to the mikvah before davening, and he's going inside anyways. He's like, I'll just take my vessel and I'll immerse it while I'm going to the mikvah. You're not allowed to be naked, so that's very important. You're not allowed to make a bracha.
So you bend over and lean into the mikvah, like stay.
Yeah, while you're clothed. Now, one second, I want to talk about something else. Now, this is another point. In our men's mikvah, for example, or our women's mikvah for that matter, you wouldn't be allowed to immerse a vessel anyways. Why? Because our men's mikvah, actually in our women's mikvah you'd be allowed to, in our men's mikvah not. In our men's mikvah, the place where people get dressed and undressed, in other words, people are commonly naked, is the same room where the pool is. So therefore, in that room, you're not allowed to make a bracha because it's considered a dressing room. And a dressing room is a disrespectful place to say Hashem's name. Our women's mikvah has separate dressing rooms, preparation rooms, and then, I'm just talking about ours, right? But you can apply this to any mikvah, right? The mikvah has to be in a room where you're allowed to make a bracha. So if that room is a place where people are commonly naked, in other words, it's a dressing room, then that's a disrespectful place to make to say Hashem's name. Okay. All right. Who can immerse in the mikvah? Who can toivel dishes in the mikvah?
Can I ask you one other question? We
Yes.
have to do one at a time, right? You can't like hold.
We're getting it. We're getting
Okay.
it. First, let's talk about who can do it. It can be a man. It can be a woman. No problem. It can even be a child or a non-Jew, as long as there is a Jew or Jewess, in other words, a Jewish male or female that is above bar and bat mitzvah that has oversight. In Hebrew, this is called, they can say testimony, right? They can say edus, that the vessel actually was immersed in the mikvah. So they have to actually see it go into the mikvah. So in other words, you can have some non-Jewish workers that are doing it, and one Jew that's overseeing them. I don't know, I guess let's say you have a catering company and you have a ton of stuff to do, right? You can have a whole bunch of non-Jews doing it, the Jew makes the bracha, and then the non-Jew can help him with immersing them all, and the Jew can oversee it. If you have a child can actually make the bracha, but there still has to be an adult that's supervising to make sure that it was done properly. I think with a child also you have to have a non-Jewish, a Jewish adult that's supervising. I'm looking, hold on. Yeah, you still have to have a Jewish adult that is supervising the child that is immersing in the mikvah, that is immersing the dishes in the mikvah.
So
Okay.
that'd be an elderly man, maybe, who can't
Exactly.
hold the stuff
For
up,
example, he
whatever.
has his 10-year-old grandson who's coming with him.
Right.
So the 10-year-old grandson could do it, and the 10-year-old grandson can even make the bracha because he's Jewish.
Right.
Right. But there has to be an adult over bar mitzvah. That's much. Yeah. Or a disabled man.
Yeah.
Right? Think
Yeah.
of these kind of instances. Okay. Let's talk about the water. The water in which you immerse dishes in the mikvah has to be just as kosher as for a woman to be able to go to, which is a biblical mitzvah. In other words, this is a biblical mitzvah. So in other words, it has to have. I don't want to get into too many of the details because this is not really ever going to be relevant to you guys. You're just going to go to a kosher mikvah, but it has to have 40 sa'ah, which is the minimum amount required.
We're going to go to your mikvah.
What?
We're going to go to your
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, most likely you guys will come here, but if you're in a different city, you'll still go to a kosher mikvah, right? You can do it. It has to be 40 sa'ah. It has to be rainwater, etc., etc. But included in this is a spring or a river or the ocean, right? You can or a well, right? These are all live water, so you can go there and you can actually immerse your kelim, your dishes in the mikvah there.
In the ocean,
That counts.
huh?
Yeah, in the ocean is fine. Yeah. All right. So if you're going to the beach and you wanna and you wanna make a barbecue, you want a brand new grill. See, I thought of a practical case. And there's no mikvah around, or you just can't be stuffed to go to a mikvah, right? Can't be bothered. You can take your grate, which is the part that touches the food, and immerse it in the ocean, and then
You don't even need to salt the food anymore.
yeah, you won't even need to salt the food. Look, you killed two birds with one stone. Perfect. I
Well,
love
you
it.
just rinse it off after, hopefully.
Okay. As usual, even though a river or a spring might not have 40 sa'ah, which is the required amount of water right there, because the water is flowing, that's fine. You can still toivel your kelim there, and that works. Yeah. Oh, sorry. He says that it's only b'shas adchak, which means that using that is only, like, let's say you're using a stream, a part of a stream that's part of a larger river, but in this small part of the stream there isn't 40 sa'ah of water. He says b'shas adchak, if you need to, you can do it. Like especially to immerse vessels, which are only rabbinically that you need to immerse them, like glass, right? And the same thing with snow, right? These are all b'shas adchak situations, which means they're like if you don't have any other situation, if you don't have any other place to do it, you can do it there. But the beach can be used to begin with, because the ocean has more than 40 sa'ah of water in it. The last I checked, I mean, it's drying up with climate change or whatever, and you never know. But for now, it still has 40 sa'ah, so it has enough.
But
What? Yeah.
whatever river or whatever water has to be flowing water.
It has to be live water. It doesn't have to actually be flowing. It has to be live water. We could talk one day about all the details of that, but the ocean counts for that. A spring counts for that. Basically, Silver Lake doesn't count for that. That's a man-made reservoir.
Yeah.
It doesn't count. All right, so that's and your pool in your backyard doesn't count. That's the differentiation there. Okay, now to Vicky's question about how do you actually do it, right? Take the vessel, submerge it completely under the water, and make sure that the water can get everywhere inside the vessel. That means inside the vessel and outside the vessel. Hold on, my beard is just being pulled. Okay, there we go. That means inside the vessel and outside the vessel. Why do I stress that? I think we spoke about this last week a little bit. Because if you have a cup or a bottle or a pitcher, especially if it has a very small opening, like let's say, I mean, this is not made out of anything. First of all, this is one-time use. Second of all, it's made out of plastic, right? But let's say you were going to immerse in something in this shape. If you just put it inside the mikvah and pull it out, the inside is not being touched by the water at all, right? So you have to put it inside, wait for the entire bottle to fill up, and then you can immerse it. Okay. All right, I went through all that. All right, if you're holding it in your hand, which we'll talk about soon, other ways of doing it, like putting it in a basket with holes. But if you're holding it in your hand, you have to make sure to hold it loosely. Why? So that your hand is not stopping water from getting under your fingers. If you have a tight grip on it, then no water is going under there. When you want to do multiple vessels, let's say you have a whole bunch of a new set of forks and knives and whatever, right? You may put them all inside a basket that has enough holes in it that the water will go in. Put the whole thing, and obviously don't put them in tight. Like you can't put in 10 spoons nestled into each other, right? You have to put them all in loosely, and then you can immerse the thing, hold just the handle of the basket, make sure the water gets to all of them, and then take it out. All right. Really, according to the letter of the law, you only need to do this one time. But the custom is to do it 3 times. So the same way that I just said you do it 3 times. So let's say you're holding a pan. You hold it by the handle, or you hold it by the thing, whatever. Hold it loosely, immerse it in the vessel, right? If you want inside the vessel, inside the water, you can even kind of let go for a second and hold back on, right? And then take it out. You do that 3 times, and then you have finished doing it. Okay. What about, as was asked earlier, electric, things that have electric in them, right? Let's say it's some sort of device, some sort of appliance that has obviously something in it, like a blade or something, or a plate that's going to touch the food and that needs to be immersed, right? But it also has a lot of electric inside this appliance. So the real proper way to do it is immerse it and then wait however long you need to wait in order to make sure that it's safe to turn it on again. If there literally is no other way to toivel it, so then you can take this vessel and give it to a Jewish engineer of sorts, if you will. He just has to take apart the vessel to some degree that it is no longer usable, and then put it back together. And now what you've done is you've made this a vessel that was made by a Jew, right? Okay, so that's one kind of loophole way out. One other way is to gift it to a non-Jew. I know we do this at Chabad sometimes. To gift it to a non-Jew and just borrow it from him for the rest of your life. For example, if I remember correctly, this samovar, this percolator that we have here for the hot water here, is owned by Ron Rohr. Ron is not Jewish. Rabbi Enoch gave it to him as a gift, and then asked him if we can borrow it in perpetuity. And this is another way that you can bypass, if you will.
It would have been too hard to
I think because he was worried. Yeah, got in mind. Yeah. Another option is to buy one that was made by a Jew. A lot of these percolators are made by Jews. This one comes to us from Restaurant Depot, which is a non-Jewish company. But if you go to Cambridge Farms, they sell them, and it's Jewish companies that are made for Shabbat. These hot water urns, that are made.
And they say on there, made by a Jew, or they...
Yeah. It says on the outside of it, made by a Jew and does not need to be
so
titled.
you don't.
Exactly. This is one of the complicated things.
Like
A percolator is one of the complicated
like
things.
warmers or stuff like that too.
What?
Like people use a lot of warmers.
Warmers. Oh, like platas. Yeah. Like for Shabbat. Yes, exactly. Same concept.
I know.
I think usually, even the people that use them, they don't have the food touching it directly. So I don't even know if it needs to be titled.
They don't.
Right, they put their 9x13 pans on it, or whatever, right? Or foil pans on it. Okay.
Oh, so then you don't have to toggle.
Right. If it's never going to come in contact with food, you don't need to table it, correct? All right. 3 more points, and then we're going to call it an end to today's class. Using a vessel that has not been tabled, right? So any food that touches, any vessel that touches food, as we mentioned, needs to be tabled, needs to be immersed in the mikvah. And therefore, you can, according to the letter of the law, you can never use it, even for a temporary one-time use. If it's a pan that's made to be used many times, and you say, "Oh, I'm using it as disposable," you still would need to table it. It doesn't work that way. You can't make something disposable. And if you use, let's say you transgressed, and you did that. You use the vessel even though it hasn't been tabled yet. What's going on? You're done. You're still using it. Should we move on to a bottle? How about this? In a bottle? I guess yes. Okay, I'll take that as a yes. If you used it, so what about the food? Right? So let's say you had a pan. Maybe you forgot. Maybe somebody didn't know. Right? Or maybe you simply, it was before you knew all the laws of tabling vessels, right? So then the food that you made in it is actually allowed to be eaten, but you should take it out from that vessel and eat it. So let's say, for example, you realize right after you cooked it in the pan, don't eat it from the pan, put it in a plate that has been tabled and use it in that. Okay? One more point. If you're in a restaurant or in a hotel, right? Are you allowed to just use, and let's say they're serving goat, right? So a kosher hotel would be, obviously, they would make sure everything is kosher. They would also be tabling part of their kosher certification. Let's say it has the okay on it, right? On the hotel or on the restaurant. That means they're making sure that the vessels are kosher. But let's say you're just going to use the glass that comes in the hotel room and you just want to have a drink of water out of it. Right? So you're drinking something kosher, or whatever, or you brought your own food from home and you're going to use their plates. Are you allowed to or not? So the answer is you should avoid it. But in a case where there's no other choice, then you can actually there are authorities upon whom to rely that it's okay to use it.
But best to bring a lot of plastic.
First of all, best to bring your own vessels of plastic, and also even if you're in this situation, you have no other choice, and you're going to do it, and you're going to rely on these other opinions. Then one thing you can do is you can use vessels from the hotel that don't need to be tabled. So let's say they have something plastic, or they have something glass, which only needs it rabbinically, right? You can still basically make the best of a situation. Does that make sense? Okay. Last point is about Shabbat. You are not allowed to tovel vessels on Shabbat. Why? Because when you immerse a vessel in the mikvah, let's say you have a pan, you just bought it in the store, and now you need to, I guess a pan is a bad example because you're not going to cook on Shabbos, right? Let's say you have a salad bowl, nice metal salad bowl. You bought it, it's gorgeous, you really want to use it for Shabbos, you forgot to tovel it before Shabbos. And maybe it's Chabad, it's at Chabad, so you don't even need to carry it, right? And Chabad owns it. Can I just take it, tovel it in the mikvah, and then use it? The answer is no. Why? Why are you not allowed to tovel a vessel on Shabbos? Because when you immerse that salad bowl in the mikvah, you are actually doing the final act to make it usable. Before that, it wasn't usable, and now you're doing the final act to make it usable. And one of the 39 laws of Shabbat, preceding this class, in a previous iteration of this class, we went through all 39 laws of Shabbat and all the details of it, is makeh b'patish, banging with a hammer, which means finalizing a product. Finalizing any product is not allowed on Shabbat. So when you immerse it in the mikvah, you're finalizing the product, and therefore you're not allowed to do that on Shabbat. So if you really need to use it on Shabbat, let's say it's Chabad right here, and they have this new salad, they must use it on Shabbat for some reason, whatever it is. One way of doing it is on Shabbat you are allowed to give it as a gift to a guy, to a non-Jew, and borrow it from him, and then you don't need to tovel it. And then on Motzei Shabbat you can take care of buying it back from him and immersing in the mikvah, etc., etc.
Well, that's a good out.
And doing it without a blessing. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's end today's class right here.
I have a question. Could you take like the salad bowl and then put aluminum around it?
Technically, yeah.
Then
Technically, you could.
go
Yeah.
to aluminum.
Yes, because you only need to. It's only not allowed to be used if you're actually going to touch it with food. That's bad practice, obviously, because somebody's going to see you using that bowl, and then they're going to use it.
Sometimes I've seen people do it, they're not sure if it's
Yeah,
properly.
exactly. So these are all loopholes, but it's not good practice to do on any semi-consistent
Right,
basis.
but
Because
you
if you
have
do
to-
that, then somebody's going to think that this vessel was tabled and they're going to use it. They're not going to realize, oh, well, he only used it with silver foil inside it, etc.
Right.
Give you an example of that, by the way. The grates in your oven should be tabled. Even though 95% of the time you're going to have a pan in there when you're baking, you're not pouring the cake batter onto the grate. But every once in a while, in a crazy situation, maybe you're in a rush or whatever, you'll throw a bagel and just put it on top of the grate, right? And not put a. I also usually put a piece of foil. But let's say sometimes it won't happen, or somebody else will use it. So it's good. The best practice is if it's something that usually people use it to put their with direct contact with food, you should actually table it.
I think the bigger thing that would happen as a sloppy cook, I'll call myself, is that, like, let's say you put bread in there and a part of it, or you put multiple rows and you're pulling it out.
Yeah,
and
one of them falls. Right.
That's, to me, the kind of thing that happens to me, right?
Like I said,
so
it doesn't make it
foil
trade.
down.
It doesn't make it trade. It doesn't make it trade. If it happens, you can still eat that food. Just don't eat it from that vessel.
But
right?
I don't have to do it because I have an electric oven and
That's
I do
whole
the
thing.
backs, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, no. That's your kashrut. You should still table it.
I still have to
The grates,
table
yeah. Because the grates is what it's going to touch. You don't have to table the sides of your oven. No food touches there, but the actual grate, yes. Okay. Thank you all for joining us for this week's Stepping Up Kosher,
Good to know.
where we learned all about tabling vessels, all about immersing our dishes in the mikvah. Thank you all for joining us. Please join us next week, same time, same place. We are going to be starting another multi-week journey next week, the laws of meat and milk, which obviously is going to take us more than 1 week, and we're going to be starting that next week. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.